Last week, Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, launched his Senate bid for Pennsylvania's open Senate seat. In his first campaign video, the former mayor of Braddock addresses economic equality in the state.
John Fetterman won the five-way race among Democrats.
He's a different kind of character, I'll tell you.
Yeah, well, that Western Pennsylvania registered Democrat, but voted for Trump. Fetterman can get a lot of those votes.
We don't have to agree on everything, but I will always tell you what I believe is the truth. I'm going to fight not for one part of Pennsylvania, not for one party of Pennsylvania, but for one Pennsylvania, just the way I did as mayor, just the way I'm doing as lieutenant governor, and just the way I would as your next U.S. senator.
Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, he joins us now to discuss that run. Lieutenant Governor, welcome back to the show. We appreciate you joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us about some of the things that motivated you to run. If you're going to get into the United States Senate, what are some of the issues in particular you feel are most animating Pennsylvanians right now?
Sure. Well, they're the same issues that I've been running on for 20 years. I mean, quite literally, my issues and the things that, and the people and the places and the policies have remained consistent over the last 20 years. And they are this idea of a living minimum wage, this idea of healthcare is a basic fundamental human right. This idea that we need a compassionate, reasonable immigration response, that members of our LGBTQIA should live with equal protection under the law the way the rest of us have, that we should end this insane war on drugs in this country and legalize marijuana to the betterment of virtually every sector of our economy and our criminal justice system. And while we're on the talking about criminal justice, I have revolutionized the pardons and commutations process as lieutenant governor here in Pennsylvania as the only individual to take on that role. You know, there's a lot of changes that need to occur here, and also rebuilding our forgotten and marginalized communities, which I was proud to represent as mayor for 4 terms here in Western Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. You know, we watched one of your interviews on MSNBC. We actually played some of it on this show. And they asked you this question. You were a Senator Sanders supporter that said, hey, are your positions too extreme for Pennsylvania? I thought your answer was phenomenal. You said no. Minimum wage, universal health care, I'm obviously paraphrasing, legalizing marijuana. These are all incredibly popular, mainstream, moderate ideas. That is certainly the case by the polling in Pennsylvania and across the country. Why is it then, when things that have such broad-based support are utterly impossible to accomplish in Washington, D.C., even now that you have Democrats in charge?
Well, because there's always going to be that block of obstructionist Republicans. That's what we have in Pennsylvania. If the leadership would allow, for example, the legalization of marijuana to go to a floor vote, just a simple up or down vote, it would pass overwhelmingly. Everyone knows that's true. Same with LGBTQIA protections. If they would allow that to just be voted up or down and say, you know what, let's stop treating these folks as third-class citizens here in Pennsylvania, or sensible tax reform in Pennsylvania, or sensible criminal justice reform. Obstructionism is the only thing that the Republicans have left, and this idea that it's too extreme. You know who can't win in Pennsylvania is Pat Toomey, and that's why he is retiring. Let's talk about who really can't run and win in Pennsylvania, and no matter who gets in this race on either side, I am the only candidate that was run and won here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and not a lot of disagreement there, sir. I'm curious, are you satisfied currently with the strategy taken by the Biden administration? They're waffling on whether they're going to include a $15 minimum wage in the reconciliation package. Is that something that you would support if you were in the U.S. Senate, using that procedure in order to bring that there with only 51 votes required?
No, I would. That's a hill I would die on. Because it's a lie that has been in our society for generations, that you can do anything closely resembling to getting by on the minimum wage. It is reprehensible. It's $7.25 an hour here in Pennsylvania, and anyone that suggests that that is an acceptable minimum wage should be forced to live and work on that wage so they can demonstrate to the rest of us how it's possible to get by. If you are to the right of Hobby Lobby on this issue, and to be clear, they're paying $15 an hour minimum wage now, you need to just reevaluate your whole core value structure there.
Right. So what was your message to, say, Senator Manchin? He came out and basically said, look, I'm not going to be for pushing minimum wage through budget reconciliation if the Senate parliamentarian doesn't say that it's okay. Biden seems to be waffling on whether or not he'll push it through budget reconciliation or try to get it through regular order, which basically means it's dead on arrival. What would your message to them be?
My message would be to to talk to Senator Manchin and just be like, hey, Senator, you're not living on $7.25 an hour. Why would you want any of your constituents to do that? This idea that people deserve and need help right now, and we need this relief bill. And let me be clear, but it's the whole idea of one check versus a completely a new way of life for millions of low-wage workers, and not only in West Virginia and Pennsylvania too. This is a fundamental issue of our time, that if you and we expect you as policymakers to play by the rules, we cannot make sure that the deck is not stacked where you are guaranteed to fail if you do play by the rules, or can't be surprised if you don't play by the rules. It is a fundamental moral and ethical issue, but it's also just good public policy.
Lieutenant Governor, there's also been a lot of discussion among some Democratic senators, actually, possibly your future colleagues, who wanted to lower income thresholds around the $1,400 checks, as well as using mean testing whenever it comes to child benefits during the pandemic. What are your thoughts on the matter?
I'll be more interested in means testing your average Americans than when they're more interested in means testing how many millions of dollars a year is it okay to pay CEOs? How many yachts can you water ski behind? This idea that the Republicans offloaded 1.8 trillions in tax cuts to them during a period of a budget deficit, and now are clutching their pearls and acting like if someone gets one penny that they may or may not have, given their income, is disingenuous to say the least. And it's not the time to have that conversation. If we're not going to worry about how much Jeff Bezos, how many billions he made today, then I don't think we should be worrying about $1,400 checks during a time of a national crisis here.
Yeah.
So Congressman Conor Lamb reportedly very likely to enter the race in the Democratic primary as well. He's sort of come to prominence and being held up as someone who can win in Trump country, represents an area in Pennsylvania outside of Pittsburgh. What do you think are the key policy distinctions between yourself and Congressman Lamb?
I would say they're numerous, and I don't want to get into them now. I would welcome Conor or anybody into the race on the Democratic side. It's only going to make for a more thoughtful conversation, perhaps. But at the end of the day, these are all good Democrats, and these are individuals that are going to add to this conversation. And we would let the people of Pennsylvania decide, who in fact should represent us in the Senate race. But I would get back to my original point. The one person who can't run and win in Pennsylvania is Pat Toomey. And that's not, he can spend more time in the private sector. It's because he can read a poll like anybody else can.
Yeah.
And finally, one specific question for you on policy. If you're in the United States Senate right now, some progressives have been pushing for not just one $2,000 check, but recurring $2,000 checks for the duration of the pandemic. Is that something you would fight for if you were there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm open to this. Stop and think about what was asked of these folks nationally to survive on one $1,200 check back in, I think it was June. The best thing I heard on that is that $1,200 is what rich people think poor people think is a lot of money. I think that's perfect. That nails it. And that's the truth. This idea, here's $1,200, you should be good for the next 3 or 4 months, is absurd. Particularly since these policies are being meted out by individuals earning $180,000 a year that have job security and health care. This is a time for us to be generous to the American people that are going to get us through this pandemic on the other side. And now is not a time for us to be nickeling and diming those that are struggling.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us, sir. We really appreciate it.
Great to have you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. Coming up, Senators Mitt Romney and Tom Cotton are actually introducing a bill to increase the minimum wage, requiring employees to implement E-Verify. So we're going to discuss that when Rising continues.